Hi, I'm Leanne and welcome to my small batch big taste kitchen. And today we are making one single serve cream scone. Now this scone would be perfect for breakfast, for tea time, or just anytime you're craving something a little bit sweet. And with no leftovers, you aren't going to be tempted to eat too many. But if you do need more than one scone, be sure to check out my small batch cream scone recipe right up there. It makes 4 scones. And I also have these yummy pumpkin scones recipe that makes 4 scones too. So check those out. I'll also in the description below link to a full-size batch of cream scones that I have on my blog if you need more than 4. All right, we're going to start by combining our dry ingredients in a bowl. And I have here a half of a cup of all-purpose flour. We're going to use some baking powder. I'm going to use half of a teaspoon. You want to make sure you have nice fresh baking powder because that's what's going to give these scones their lift. So you don't want old expired baking powder. So half a teaspoon of there. And then we're just going to stir that around and add in some butter. Now I'm using just 1 tablespoon of butter, but you want your butter to be cold. And it's important that it's cold for a very specific reason. But you notice I've also kind of chopped it up into little pieces. That makes it easier to incorporate and still keep that butter cold. But when the butter is cold, when it gets in the oven and it starts to melt, it releases some steam, which gives that scone a little oomph and helps it to rise and make it nice and flaky. So cold butter is important. Then we're just going to take a pastry blender. If you don't have a pastry blender, you can just use a fork to smash the butter into there or 2 knives to kind of cut the butter up. But you want to cut it up until it gets nice in little tiny pieces and your flour is going to look crumbly. All right, next we're going to add in our wet ingredients after the butter is nice and incorporated. All right, and the last dry ingredient we're going to add in, you could add this in before with your flour, but is your tablespoon of granulated sugar. Just go ahead and combine that in there. All right, now we're ready for our wet ingredients. And I've made just a little bit of a well or indentation in the bottom of my flour mixture there. And I'm gonna add in a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And I just kind of measure with my heart when it comes to extract. And then we're gonna add in, remember these are cream scones, so we are using heavy whipping cream. Now, if you don't have heavy whipping cream, you could use buttermilk, half and half. And if you have to, use milk. But I do think you get a better, more tender scone with either buttermilk or heavy whipping cream. And I'm just gonna start, I've got 3 tablespoons in here, but I'm not gonna add that all in at one time because I'm not sure exactly today with the weather and everything else how much I'm gonna need. So I'm gonna add in about 2 tablespoons. And with a fork, just mix that together. The thicker your cream, so if you're using a heavy cream, it's going to take a little bit more than if you're using a thinner milk, just like regular milk. And it looks like I'm probably going to need all 3 tablespoons today. All right, now my dough is going to probably look a little dry and shaggy, which is fine. You just kind of want to get the dry flour incorporated. And one of the tricks with a nice flaky scone is you want to handle the dough as little as possible because you want that butter to stay cold. We're gonna add in for our scone today, like I mentioned before, is I'm gonna use mini chocolate chips. You could use regular sized chocolate chips too. I'm using about a tablespoon of mini chocolate chips. So I'm gonna add that in. All right. And if it still looks just a little too dry, go ahead and add in a little bit more milk or cream. All right, but like I said, it's totally okay if your dough looks a little bit dry because once we get our hands in there, and it's gonna all come together. So I'm just gonna pour it onto the counter. And then just with my hands, you can see how it just comes together. Get all those little chocolate chips in there. The warmth of your hand is gonna help, but like again, we don't wanna overhandle the dough, but you can see it came together just like that into a nice little ball. All right, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a process which is called laminating. This is totally optional. You could just form your scone right now and be good to go. But what laminating does, it's kind of a folding process, and what it helps is it helps you get a higher rise on your scone and a flakier scone. So I'm just gonna flatten this into a rectangle. And then I'm gonna fold it like you were folding a piece of paper to go into an envelope. I'm just gonna bring up the top and then bring over the bottom. So I folded it into just a little I don't know, we called this a hot dog fold in school, didn't we? Okay. And then I'm gonna just flatten it out with my hand again. And I'm gonna fold it the other way. This is the way we're folding it, hamburger, right? Like that, and then over again, and there we go. All right, and now you can fold it into whatever shape of a scone you want. If you want a round scone, if you want a rectangular scone, I like my scones to be kind of like a little bit of a triangle. So we're gonna fold it or form it into a triangle. You want the scone to be about a half inch or so high. See my little triangle? All right. Now we're gonna grab a baking sheet, cover it with some parchment paper, and we're gonna pop it into a 400-degree oven, Fahrenheit, for 12 to 15 minutes. You're gonna watch it to see, you want it to turn nice and golden brown on the outside. But we're gonna do one more thing before we do that. Okay, got my baking sheet, we covered it with some parchment. We're gonna put our scone on there, and then I'm gonna grab a pastry brush, and we are gonna take some of that leftover whipping cream that we had, and we're gonna just brush it on the top. This is gonna help give it a more golden brown top. Now you only wanna brush it on the top, not on the sides, because you don't wanna like seal those sides. You want them to be able to rise and get as flaky as possible. And then one more thing you can do if you're feeling a little bit extra is I've got some raw sugar here, or just some coarse sugar will work. And I'm gonna sprinkle it on top. It just makes it a little prettier. It gives it a little bit of a sweet crunch on top. But again, it's totally optional. All right, like I said, 400 degrees, 12 to 15 minutes. All right, our scone is done. Look how perfectly golden brown. It was exactly 15 minutes. That seems to be the sweet spot for at least my oven and scones. You're gonna want it to be golden brown on the bottom, nice and lightly golden brown on the top. Let's look and see, it's still warm. How nice and flaky that is on the inside. All you need to do now is grab a cup of tea. You could put a little butter on, a little jam, or a little clotted cream like the British do. Well, I hope you enjoyed this single chocolate chip or whatever flavor you want. It's cream scone. I'd love to hear what flavor scone you're gonna make. Leave me a comment down below and let me know. And thanks for joining me in the kitchen, and we'll see you in the next video.